So this is one of those stories that's probably not going to make breaking news, um, which is probably why it's so important. Um, so this is from NBC News. A woman will likely be Mexico's next president, but in some indigenous villages, men hold the power. And I guess they pulled this from the Associated Press. At 4:30 a.m., the girls and women begin to appear in the dark streets of this rural village of Tojolabo people in southern Mexico. They walk in silence. Some are headed to grind corn to make their families tortillas. Others fetch firewood to carry home on their backs or with the help of a donkey. The youngest hurry to finish chores before running to school. Hours later, it's still morning and it's time to talk. A group of young women and men gather in the classroom at the Plan de Alaya High School. They've come to discuss gender equality and reflect on the role of women in this remote indigenous community in Chiapas, Mexico's poorest state. J.D. Hernandez, 17, wants to be a veterinarian and play basketball, so her first attempts to form a team failed. There were 12 of us, but my friends got married and there were only 4 of us left. Madai Gomez, 18, complains that she can't express opinions in her town. They think women don't know anything. 2 indigenous women lead the workshop and dozens attend. Years ago, such an initiative would have not been so well received, they say, but change is coming, albeit slowly. 70 years ago, Mexican women won the right to vote, and today the country is on the verge of electing its first woman president. Yet some of the indigenous women who will vote in Sunday's national elections still don't have a voice in their own homes and communities. In Plan de Ala and other corners of Mexico, women can't participate in local government. Men set priorities. They don't decide how to spend resources, repair the school or the park. Plan de Alaya's women aren't even registered residents, even though they're on voter rolls, so its 1,200 men can only guess at the true population. With no official data, it's unclear how many communities operate this way, but it's one of many contradictions for a part of the Mexican population that for centuries has been marginalized. Now indigenous women are pushing for change, little by little, with the younger generation often leading the charge. A path to activism. Of more than 23 million indigenous people in Mexico, nearly 20% of the population, well over a half, live in poverty, according to the government data from 2022. And women face the worst of it, with the lowest rates of literacy in their communities and little, if any, right to own land. Neither of the 2 women candidates for president, Claudia Sheinbaum for the governing Moreno party and the opposition's Xochitl Galvez, have spoken much about indigenous issues. Still, women in this region can't hide some hope that a woman president could better address some of their most pressing needs: healthcare and education access and protection from domestic violence. Status of Mexico's indigenous peoples leaped onto the international stage in 1994 in Chiapas, where Zapatista guerrilla fighters declared war against the government. They aimed not to take power, but demand that the government address racism and marginalization suffered by indigenous peoples. The movement had unusually high participation from women. 12 days in fighting and years of negotiation culminated in 2001 with the constitutional amendment that recognized the rights of indigenous people to autonomous government, to preserve their languages, land, and cultural identity, and to have access to basic rights such as healthcare and education. This allowed many small indigenous communities to govern themselves and choose their leaders within national political influence. It also meant that the federal government frequently looks the other way when those local customs contradicted basic rights like gender equality. After the uprising, indigenous women felt encouraged to fight for their rights in their communities. In some places they succeeded, but poverty and inequality persist in many indigenous communities. So, that article sort of touches on 2 issues that I don't think get discussed enough. I mean, one, it's just the room that we still need to grow when it comes to women's rights. We've come a long way, right? And if you think about, I might have said this before, but if you think about how the place for women 50, 100 years ago, and you look at it now, I mean, women have made enormous strides on their, more or less on their own, right? Like it's not that men suddenly gave them rights and opportunities. No, they fought for those rights and opportunities. But a simplistic view of history would be like, oh, okay, well, we solved women's rights, and like women have rights now, so nothing to worry about. Even though there are still many, many struggles that women face. I mean, literally, terminations of pregnancies have been outlawed in some states in the United States. So, home of the free, land of the brave, yada yada. So, I mean, women are still facing a lot of issues, even in 2024. Domestic violence, difficulty accessing the right kind of healthcare. Then the other thing this story brings up is indigenous rights. Now, indigenous rights, I think, often totally get sidelined in these sorts of conversations, just because those people don't fit into, the post-industrial Western society, technological society that, most people in the West now grew up in, or many people at least. So it's heartening to see that Mexico very well might have a woman president. Excuse me. But of course, just like you can't say that, like, having a mixed president like Barack Obama solved racism. You can't say that having a woman president is going to solve patriarchy. I mean, I guess it pushes the glass ceiling. Is that the expression? I forget the term, but but change like this sort of has to come, I think, from within and in very like grassroots, localized situations. It's sort of like, I mean, this is just an analogy, but it's sort of like, reform in various Muslim countries, right? Because, you'll look at women's rights in various Muslim countries, and many of them don't have a good track record on that, right? But the solution to that, at least in my view, is that women within these societies have to try to fight for that change, and people of privilege in those societies who can help project the voices of these women should be doing so. So it's similar in a country like Mexico, right? Like, if we want to improve the quality of women's lives, particularly indigenous women's in Mexico, then Mexican people, have to start fighting for it. It has to become a national, both a state and national priority. Now, of course, one would hope that with a woman president, maybe she would be more conscious of issues like this and could be swayed to make it a priority. We'll see. I will update you guys on the results of that election. It's very exciting if Mexico does in fact have their first woman president. It's about time the U.S. does the same, but we haven't been so lucky so far. So yeah, in conclusion, we need to keep fighting for women's rights. We need to keep fighting for indigenous people's rights. I hope the lives of women and indigenous people improve in Mexico, and we'll keep an eye out on that election on Sunday.